everybody. Welcome back to the third edition of Terrace Talk this season. Of course, Norwich City do return to Championship action on Saturday. Sheffield United, the visitors to Carrow Road. They've had sort of a fairly good record, I'd say, over recent times against Norwich. So not a game I particularly look forward to, but of course, delighted to be joined by Ollie from the Sheffield United Way. Ollie, I mean, first of all, thanks for coming on the show. Really do appreciate your time. But let's just very briefly touch on last season. I know you're not going to, enjoy this maybe or not want me to get that out of you, but 20th.
I feel like I'm having a Vietnam flashback. I'll be like there in a shower just weeping if we go into it too much detail.
But the key stats maybe don't make for good reading. Norwich fans can relate to it probably in recent times. 20th in the Premier League, 16 points, 100 goals conceded. How tough was that? I suppose it's not an enjoyable experience, is it?
It's not. No, it is horrendous, to be honest. And it's one of them where you almost, because we've done it twice now in the last 4 years. So obviously there's COVID season when everything was in lockdown. I think we got 21 points and went down and I think we didn't win a game that season for the first, is it 19, 21, something like that. So going back up this time, doing it again, but this time with fans in the ground felt awful. Absolutely awful. Was turning up every week. I think in my life, I've only ever left a game early once. It was last year, and it was half-time when I think we were 4-0 down, 5-0 down to Arsenal. And I was just sat there going, this is going to be 10, 11, 12. As long as they want to score, they will continue to score. And it was a ultimately unbelievably depressing season. And I'm just hoping for some championship catharsis. We need to have a really nice season where we win a lot. That's what I need.
Yeah, I'm going to put you out of your misery and move on to this season. I mean, you sort of mentioned there about hope for the new campaign. Where's the optimism levels amongst Sheffield United fans for this campaign? I mean, you've brought in some relatively good signings. We'll get into those in a little bit more detail as we go on this show. But the expectations for this campaign, where you sort of set, your bar, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it was really important that going into the summer, we were setting our bar quite low. There's a lot of overhang from such a terrible Premier League season. We've also seen sort of 15, 16 players leave the club. A lot of them really key players that have just left us on free transfers at the end of contracts. So coming into it, I was really trying to be, whenever we used our channel, I was trying to say, just challenging for the top six would be a good season. Let's just stabilise in the Championship. We've made the signings, and I think the fans are starting to have a little bit higher expectations than that. I think the expectation is top six is a minimum, and we should be able to compete maybe a little bit beyond that. For me, I still think that aiming for sixth place is a realistic place. We want to be in the playoffs, but I don't think we got the strength. I don't think we're good enough. I don't think we've got the mental strength through our squad because of what happened last season to challenge any further than just going for a playoff spot.
Yeah, 1 win, 1 draw, and a win in the Carabao Cup so far this campaign. It's been a pretty positive start. I mean, what have you made to that start to the campaign? Has the football been good? The results mirroring the performances on the pitch?
Yeah, well, there's been pros and cons. So first day we played Preston. Now, I don't like to just drive by people, but Preston are awful. Really, really bad. And so we won that one really comfortably. They couldn't really lay a glove on us. But the main thing for me was that we'd not created loads. So we'd beat them, and we'd beat them relatively comfortably, but we'd scored a deflected goal and a goalkeeper mistake. So I was starting to think, okay, how's our creativity coming together? We then played QPR last weekend, and for 45 minutes, it was as good as I've ever seen United play. I mean, Gus Harmer and Callum O'Hare, when they link up, are just out of this world. They were so impressive. I was so just excited to see more of them. And then United did what United do, and they tempered all of that expectation by putting in the worst second half performance that was up there with what we were seeing last year in terms of how poor, how sort of heads had gone. Everybody was just sort of trying to get out of there without being too damaged. So, yeah, really disappointing second half on Saturday, but there's been a lot of positives. We've changed our system altogether. So we've gone from the traditional Sheffield United overlapping 5 at the back, overlapping centre halves, and now we're doing more of a 4 at the back, 4-2-3-1 system. We've got an inverted left winger who's trying to tunnel the play inside, interchanging between Hamer and O'Hare. So they kind of swap positions, and you'll see them roam to try and find that space. You've then got Kiefer Moore, the big man up front, and we're playing more of a traditional winger down the right. Currently, it's a young academy player, Andre Brooks, but we've just brought in Jezerin Raksake from Palace. He played sort of 3 minutes at the weekend because he just wasn't there in time to be fit. But I'd expect to see him a lot more involved this weekend. And I think that's going to be really exciting because he looks like such a dribbly player and actually gives us quite a nice balance. We've got a really attacking left back who's going to bomb forward to give us the width on the left. We'll have Raksake giving width on the right, with Harmer and O'Hare sort of operating in that half space between the sort of centre-left space. It's quite a nice thing to watch when it works, but yeah, it's just got to work.
Yeah, lots of good names there that many, Championship fans will know well. One man in the dugout that a lot of Norwich fans, Championship fans, football fans will know well, Chris Wilder, of course, back in the Blades dugout for his, second time and arrived in December, seemingly trying to pick up the bones of a pretty wrecked ship. This time around in the Championship, you mentioned that kind of change in style. What's his kind of view now from the fan base? Is he still loved as much as he was, the boyhood Blade?
It's funny. I think there is probably two camps, if we're being honest. There's very much I referenced it before. So Wilder left United, and I have to kind of explain the context so people understand it a little bit more. Wilder left United after we'd had the worst ever start in Premier League history. I think we'd won one game and we'd got maybe 7 points or something by about March. He then left United sort of through the back door, but that was all during COVID. And so the fans weren't there to experience it. They weren't there to turn on the team, to shout at them, to boo them. And so it almost felt inevitable that he had to come back because there's so much unfinished business. And that business is with the fans in the room having the conversation. And so all of those fans really wanted to see him come back so that he's the legend. He's the biggest Sheffield United legend of my life, of a lot of fans' lives, especially of the last sort of 40 years. You're not going to have anyone who's disparaging the legend that is Chris Wilder at United. But that's all a very emotional response. You've then got the more logical side of the fan base, those who maybe look at his experience at Middlesbrough, his experience at Watford. They look at how he left United and what had happened before he left us and started to say, well, we're a Premier League team that have gambled on this manager that couldn't get a championship job. And that sets off some alarm bells. And there's still this argument going on where the majority of the fans 100% love him or behind him, but you can completely understand this sort of undercurrent of he might have lost that magic that he had in the first place. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think a good start to the season, everybody will be on board because nobody wants to see. I think if I could choose one man to succeed at United, I'd choose Chris Wilder. He's the only man I want to run it, but that's a big if. And we can't always function in dreams, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can imagine you'll get an interesting reception from the Carrow fan base after, I think, going back 7 or 8 years now with the old team bus rant that I think still gets banded around. You mentioned some of the sort of transfer incoming, some pretty, well-known names in the Championship, the likes of Kiefer Moore, of course, Callum O'Hare, an exciting player from his time at Coventry, Tyrese Campbell, of course, trying to maybe get back to his best. Norwich fans will know a certain player I'm going to ask you about in just a moment. Then you've got some of the younger options as well. Raksake, as you mentioned, an exciting upcoming player in Harrison Burrows as well, a good player from his time at Posh. So what have you made of all that incoming business? From the outside, it looks like some really good additions.
Yeah, it's probably, I don't think I've ever seen United sign a collective of fantastic footballers all at the same time before. It's one of them that you can't help but get excited and get a little bit carried away in it. I think every player we've signed, and this is how I've been trying to rationalize it when I explain it, is every player we've signed is fantastic. I can have no problem at all with each individual player. The problem is that we've not signed enough of them. So we've got a starting 11, but as soon as someone gets injured or we have to make a sub, that's when it falls apart. And you kind of saw that to an extent on Saturday, where we played QPR and at halftime, their manager made a switch. He changed their tactics a little bit. He got them to press a little bit higher, really put pressure on our back line. And we had nothing on the bench to try and counteract that. So we ended up sitting in this shape that we knew wasn't working, but couldn't do anything about for 40 minutes. And then at the end, you were like, right, well, we're going to have to just throw some kids on and see what happens. So we need more business, but what we've done is fantastic. And the name I think that's excited me the most, you didn't actually mention, was Michael Cooper. Joined us from Plymouth. Really highly rated young goalkeeper. Obviously, before his significant injury he had a couple of seasons ago, lots of people, even when he was in League One, were talking about him as the best keeper outside of the Premier League. So I'm really excited to bring him in. But also, we've not had a number one since when we were in League One, I think. I can't remember the last time we had an undisputed number one that wasn't on loan. Obviously, we had Wes Fotheringham played for us for a couple of years, but every summer, every transfer window, the fans would go, could sign a new keeper, or we could think about this. So, yeah, it's just so nice to have a proper number one, somebody who's signed on, who's going to be here for 10 years. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about the business. We just need a little bit more of it over the next 10 days to really get us to that place that we want to be going into attack the season.
Yeah, one of those incomes I just want to ask you a little bit more detail on, of course, is Sam McCallum. Left Norwich this summer after a few years. Probably splits opinion a little bit. Some fans really rated him, some fans less so. I mean, joined Sheffield United on a free transfer. From the outside, looks, a good bit of business, a good backup option maybe in the Championship. I think he's maybe had a bit of an injury, so you've not seen a lot of him. But what did you make of that piece of business?
Yeah, I actually really like that business. Like you've said, he's been injured, so he's not been able to actually play yet in the league. He got injured in maybe even the first friendly he played. I think it was away at Rotherham. So only our second friendly of pre-season. And so we've not seen loads of him. But I'm expecting him to potentially be our starting left back, if I'm being honest. We saw at the weekend that Harrison Burrows, for all of his fantastic talent, he ain't a defender. I'm not trusting him as your left back in a four. He's a wing back. He's a winger. I'm not sure about that sort of defensive solidity. So I wouldn't be shocked to see McCallum start to be our first choice left back with Burrows pushed into one of those attacking positions, just giving him that little bit of freedom to develop without too much responsibility on his defending. So I'm quite excited to see more of McCallum. I really want to see him get stuck in. I actually, in our match preview that we did, so the preview we've done on Sheff United Way, I've picked McCallum to start in this one. I think it'd be a good time to really see what he's all about. I think he's going somewhere that is familiar, and I think he might relish that opportunity. So I think it's a good piece of business, and I think he's actually probably going to play more than we maybe expect at this point.
Yeah, before we turn the attention forward to the game, on outgoings, I mean, maybe some of the high-profile players yet to depart, the likes of Gus Hamer, as you've already mentioned, seems to be having a very good start to the Championship campaign. I think there's maybe a few rumours around him. Obviously, you had the likes of McBurney's, of course, departed at the end of the window. He's now gone off to Spain for a new adventure. I think Osula as well moved on as well. So a few kind of notable names. But what have you made? Do you think there's going to be more outgoings before the end of the window? Some of the key players maybe moving on.
At least one. So Anel Ahmedodzic, he's going to leave fairly shortly. I think it's to be expected. At the very least, he'll leave before the end of the window. But I would expect it before then. There's lots of rumours that Ipswich, West Ham, Wolves, and maybe I think it's Brentford are in for him. So we'll see how they bid it out. I think that should be a fairly substantial fee that we'd be looking to receive, though. And hopefully that gives us a little bit of scope to reinvest. I think the main thing for us, the players who have got rumours about them are Oliver Arblaster, our young midfielder, come through the academy, looks a fantastic talent. And then Gus Hamer, who you've referenced. But Hamer's release clause has expired, so nobody can come in and trigger his release clause. I think it'd take a massive bid to try and get him out of Bramall now, particularly seeing the link up that he's got with the other players in the squad. Arblaster, I don't think anybody will pay the money that we're going to want. So I think it will probably just be Anel that leaves us. The only other one that maybe could go is Vinny Souza. And he's an interesting character. I hated him. Let's not mince words. I couldn't stand the man. I despised him as I've ever despised a Sheffield United player until about 2 weeks ago. Then I saw him play against Preston and I went, oh my God, Jesus Christ, he's a player. What? Where's this kid been for 12 months? So I'm now very much hoping he stays, because I think if he does stay, he'll be outstanding in the Championship. But yeah, they're the two I'd expect that maybe will move on, and be Souza and Anel. But other than that, I think we're fairly well set. We're in the midst of a takeover. If that goes through, that'll give us the funds we need to recruit, so we wouldn't need to sell anymore. I think the Osula deal, honestly, is the most insane transfer that I've ever seen Sheffield United be a part of. Like, we paid £24 million for Ryan Brewster, and I'm sat here going, Jesus, we've ripped Newcastle off for Osula, because I just can't understand. He was a player who, I think in his professional career, at least for United, he'd got 3 goals in 39. They'd come in the FA Cup last season. And he's a big physical specimen, don't get me wrong. He'd got some attributes, but yeah, that deal has meant that we don't have to sell anybody else, and we've not lost anybody who would expect to be contributing to our first team. I have no idea why, but that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was definitely, even from the outside, looked like a real good bit of business from Sheffield United. I mean, Norwich has sort of got a few, I suppose, outgoings this summer that fans are maybe applauding. One of those, of course, is Jonathan Rowe. Looks like he'll be departing before this game on Saturday. With that, just intrigued to maybe get your take on Norwich this campaign. You know, obviously been a bit of a slow start under new management, of course, and lots of new players arriving. I think there's a potential new addition coming through before the game as well on Saturday. Where have you maybe pitched Norwich in championship predictions? You know, it's always difficult, I suppose, you know, when you're sort of on the outside, but always intrigued to get your thoughts.
No, of course. And I think it's a really interesting one because it's all about how the new manager embeds for me. I know, obviously, you've lost a lot of players in there. I think Gabby Sara, obviously, John Rowe. I was talking to Gab Sutton about it because we do the EFL debate and we did both of our Norwich predictions as well. I think he'd got your 7th and I'd got your 9th. And I think, to be honest, even with the players departing, I'd still look at it around that kind of space, a top half, but maybe just not quite at the level to make the playoffs. And I think for me, that's just how much you've lost in terms of the creativity of those two players. You know, you look at their numbers from last season, and I know that Sargent is the standout talent. I know that when he's in the team, generally speaking, Norwich won when you played last year. It was just an insane record he got. But yeah, I think losing Rowe, losing Sargent just dropped you that little bit in my expectations. I think Thorup's going to be exciting, but it's going to have to get used to the championship. It's hard for a new manager to just immediately jump in, get his ideas across. So I'm excited to see how it goes. But I'm also excited because it's the new director of football that you got in as well, didn't you, towards the back end of last year?
Yeah.
And really excited to see what business he pulls out because obviously you're going to have a bit more money to spend with Rowe. You've referenced that you've got one hopefully coming through the door before Saturday. And I think that obviously, Norwich have done that before when you had Webber and you had Farker, and I think it's just exciting to see what the next iteration of that starts to look like now. So a rebuilding year, but one that I think should be relatively positive. That's my outsider's opinion at the very least.
No, I think you're spot on. I'd probably agree with that assessment completely. Moving forwards now to the game on Saturday. I mean, Norwich looking for their first win. Sheffield United, of course, hoping to remain unbeaten, you know, at the start of the campaign. Where are your thoughts at going into this game? Are you feeling positive heading down to Carrow Road?
I am feeling wearily positive. It's one of them where I saw enough in the 45 minutes against QPR, the first half. I thought that our attacking players really looked like they were starting to connect. You know, Hamer and O'Hare obviously know each other really well from their time at Coventry, but the way that they were linking in with Moore, the way that Vinny Souza was sort of dominating that midfield battle, and Brooks was then being able to stretch it down the right. I think that's going to be a trouble for any defensive structure. I think particularly someone with a new manager where we've seen obviously maybe some teething issues. I think that in particular is really going to stand out. So I like to think that we'll get at you, but we can't defend at all. We just can't. I don't know what it is. We've got some nice footballers. I look at the players and I go, yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's good. Put them together, cannot defend for love nor money. So I think it's going to be a really entertaining game. We had a bit of a poll on our channel and we'd got the winner was 2-2. So everybody else was predicting a 2-2. I'd gone 2-1 to United. I think we might just edge this. You referenced yourself. I think we've got a pretty decent record against Norwich in recent years. And yeah, hopefully that continues because despite our good start, obviously, with a 2-point deduction, we still find ourselves in not a fantastic position 2 games in.
Yeah. I think it's unbeaten in the last 7 games against Norwich. So, yeah, certainly a little bit of a bogey team for us, particularly since I think the last time we beat you and everything that came after that. Just finally, before we sort of end off the show, I mean, any memorable moments, I suppose, between Norwich and Sheffield United games that maybe stick out in your memory for sort of seasons gone by? We've often been sort of having good tussles, I suppose, in the Championship.
Yeah, Championship tussles where we were trying to be 1 and 2, and then Premier League tussles where we're trying not to be 19 and 20. Definitely seems like the way to go. It's funny because I was thinking about this for hours yesterday. I got it in my head that there was a player who'd played for both teams, James Wilson. He hadn't played for both teams at all. He just scored for us at Carrow Road. And I remembered his goal, but for some reason I remembered him scoring it for you. So clearly you can't massively trust my memory in terms of how these things come together. But yeah, I think it was those games for me right at the top when we were trying to chase you down for the title. We were really trying to come back at you and we couldn't quite get there, but we did have some very memorable games that I enjoyed watching. I think it was, did Billy score the winner in one? And I think that's the one where I was like, oh yeah, this is United. This is the team.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully we get an exciting game on Saturday. Just finally, Ollie, do you want to plug your podcast and where Norwich Sheffield United fans can find the content?
Indeed, yeah, thank you so much. So I'm at Beastly Ollie on Twitter. I apologise for the handle, but I've had it forever. And so why change the brand? Beyond that, we are the Sheff United Way. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter. And then if you want to hear any wider championship coverage, I do the EFL Championship debate every Monday with Gab Sutton. Gab's a fantastic man for covering all of the EFL. So even if you don't follow me, I'd still recommend you follow him.
Yeah, of course, I had Gab on this podcast a few times last year. Obviously, good Birmingham insight. So, yeah, we'll link all that good stuff down below. You can go check out Ollie and, his fellow colleagues' content, and that's probably well worth looking at before this game on Saturday. Looking forward to it. Hopefully, it'll be a nice sun-bathed Carrow Road, lots of good football, lots of noise, and obviously, from a Norwich City perspective, we're hoping for the first 3 points of the campaign, but I'm not expecting an easy test against the difficult and tricky Blades.